Charles Clarke, January the 22nd, 1946, Dayton, Ohio. We lived in the inner city, and then we ended up moving out into the county. In a little town called Clayton, and while we was living there, they was building a new house on a big piece of property. When we moved into the house, my mom did not know this. I had a stepfather, but he was like a father. I had tried to go in the Marines. And the day that we went down for the Marines to take the physical, there was 3,000 people being inducted into the Army and other services. And it was chaos. And I said, I didn't want anything to do with that. So I couldn't see when it came time to see. So when we got back to Dayton, I walked into the Navy recruiter's office, told him what I did, and he said, well, we can't do anything for 90 days. And I didn't tell my mom anything about it. Then he came and got me, and we went and took the physical again. And I was only 17 years old. I was a senior in high school. He came to the house and knocked on the door. And with me begging and him, she agreed and let me join the Navy.
What year was that?
1963, October the 20th. And I got on an airplane and flew to Chicago, Illinois, and got on a bus and went to Great Lakes. My mother used to always say, she had a thing, boy, if you don't straighten up, you go into jail. Well, one day, the FBI came and knocked on the door. And it like to scare the pants off of her. And they explained to her this, that no, it's not bad, we're doing an investigation. I was getting a security clearance, and they had to do a background check on me. When I was stationed at Lakehurst, New Jersey, I was given a job. The commanding officer had his own Navy vehicle, and he wanted a license plate on the front of the car. And I was given the job to make that license plate. So I called her, and I said, by the way, I'm doing what you told me I was always going to do. She said, what's that? I said, I'm making license plates. Back then, it was a long training. It was 16 weeks, and today it's shorter. But being up in Great Lakes in November, December, and January, it wasn't unusual to get a snowfall that you'd have a couple of feet of snow. Matter of fact, the night that we was leaving, they shut down for 2 weeks from Christmas, and so they let you go home. That night it did snow about 2 feet. So we had to traipse out to get on the buses to go to the airport in that snow. But they taught you how to shoot a rifle, firefighting, first aid. It was just, and it was just so much that they put on you for knowledge. And I didn't understand why until I got in the Navy, and then I figured out why. You definitely need to know how to firefight on board a ship. My first ship was the USS Shangri-La, CVA 38. It was an aircraft carrier, home ported out of Jacksonville, Florida. I picked it up it was on a med cruise, and I picked it up in the country of Malta, is where I caught it at. And I came back. We did a yard period in Philadelphia on it, and then we went back to the med, when we went back to the med, when we got to Athens, Greece, is when I got off of it and came back to the States, because I decided I wasn't going to stay in the Navy. And I was out for a couple of months, and I went back to the recruiter and rejoined the Navy. Then I went to an LST out of Little Creek, Virginia, and I did 2 years there. Then I got orders, and I went to the USS Rourke, DE 1053, out of San Diego, California. And that was my first trip to Vietnam on there. I was there a year and a half, and a whole bunch of people made rate, and there was too many of us in the same rate, which was bosun mate, and they needed to get rid of some of us, and so I raised my hand and volunteered, and I went to an old destroyer, USS Dennis J. Buckley, 808, and it was a great ship. We was getting along good, and one day I was on a roving patrol, and I carried a 40. When I'm on that patrol, you carried a 45 on your hip. And the commanding officer looked at me and says, "Bosun mate, secure the brow. Do not let anybody leave the ship." And he left. He came back about an hour later. He told the officer on the deck, passed the word that all crew members assemble on the mess decks. And he told us then, on Monday, and this was Tuesday morning, that the following Monday we was getting underway and we was going to Vietnam. We didn't know when we was coming back. The ship got ready that week, and the admiral told the captain, do not let all your crew go, because a lot of them's not going to show up. But we had regular liberty over the weekend, and Monday morning when we got underway, the admiral says, "How many people are you missing?" And the captain replied, "0." It was a very, very tight crew. Got over to Vietnam, was off the coast of Vietnam, and we was giving gunfire support. Every morning, Charlie would come out and shoot at us. He'd just throw one bullet out there, and he'd get within 50 yards most of the time. And captain got tired of that, and he said, told the after gun mount, he says, "I want you ready to shoot when he shoots. When he fires, you fire back." And we did, and we blew him out. And then we got sent to sea for 60 days, chasing aircraft carriers on plane guard. And then we ended up coming back to the States, and that ship got decommissioned. And I went to a place called Lakehurst, New Jersey. I was stationed there. I stayed there for a year. And then I went to the USS Albany. I was there for 2 years. And the Albany went over to the Mediterranean to be home ported in Gaeta, Italy. The USS Little Rock was over there. I cross-decked over to Little Rock. On the way back to the States, we found out that the Little Rock was going to be decommissioned because they found that they had a large crack in the keel, and it wasn't worth trying to fix it. And so all these guys, they sent these messages to the detailer. And so the detail would just give them whatever they wanted. I didn't send a message. When we got back to the States, we offloaded all the Admiral's stuff who had been over in Gaeta. He had came back already and was stationed in DC. We loaded all his stuff on a truck, and I drove the truck up to DC. That's when I called my detailer and worked out a set of orders to go to the USS Fisk out of Bayonne, New Jersey. I did 2 years on there, and then I came down to Charleston. Well, on that ship, I came to Charleston. I fell in love with Charleston. And when I got off that ship, I went to the USS Mahan, DDG 42. I was on there for a little over a year. It went to Philly for a yard period. The USS Pratt, which was DDG 44, was in the yards. I cross-decked over to the Pratt and came back to Charleston. After about a year and 4 months or 5 months, I got off of there and went to Naval Reserve Center, Orlando, Florida. And I was there for 3 years. I wanted to retire down there. My wife says, no, take me back to Charleston. So I got a ship out of Charleston and was there, and that was my last ship, and that was the USS Trip, FF 1075. That was my 23 years in the Navy. I was a bosun mate. Bosun mate's in charge of the exterior of the ship, painting, anchoring the ship when to use the anchors, coming into port, taking care of the bow lines up forward, mooring the ship. The paint locker, in charge of the paint locker. Some of the ships have sail lockers, and was in charge of the sail locker, sewing. There's just so many jobs that was there, and always was the boats that are on the side of the ship, that hang on the side of the ship, and one of them is a whale boat, and that's used for man overboard and putting it in the water. I was a master coxsman. I was also a master helmsman. And underway watches, the helm, which steers the ship. Lee helm is the guy that uses the telegraph, they call it a telegraph, that sends the messages down to the engine room to how fast we're going to go. And then, of course, lookouts, and you generally have two, port and starboard, and one aft. The one aft is not only looking for anything coming up behind us, but would be also looking for anybody that might fall overboard. The aircraft carrier and the two old destroyers had canvas bottom racks. And if you made it as tight as you wanted it. Some guys didn't like re-cinching it up, but I like mine tight, and I generally slept either in the middle rack or the top. I didn't like the bottom one. The newer ships had what we call coffin lockers. It's a metal locker. It's 6 foot long by, I guess, 4 foot wide. The lid lifted up, and that's where you kept all your clothes. So it's different. That's why in the Navy, we learn how to fold our clothes into very small pieces to be able to pack them in a small area. 0600. I never got up at 6. I was always up before 6. After I had gotten married, I didn't get married till 75. When I would leave the house, I would be on ship and have a cup of coffee in my hand. And when they blew reveille, I would turn on the lights in the berthing compartment. That was me. I was never sleeping in. I was always like that. A couple of the ships, we had chaplains on board, which was the biggest one was the Albany. And I'm not Catholic, but me and the Catholic priest would end up on the fantail in the morning, and we would just talk about anything, you know, it was nothing religious. It was how pretty the sky was, or how dark it looked, you know, and it was neat. I met a lot of great people in my career. We was, the first ship I was on, the USS Rourke, we was in coast and the Chinese was putting these big groups of rice together in bags, and it was putting them in the water so the tide would take them into shore. We tried to do everything in the world to sink them, and they was, I mean, they, unless we hit them with a big bomb, they wasn't going to sink. We went out there, we poked holes in them, we did everything, we couldn't get them to sink. Other than that, just on the two ships, and being on the ship, you don't see a whole lot. We knew when the B-52 bombers were going over and bombing, because you couldn't see them, or you couldn't hear them, but you could see the bombs coming down. And then you could start seeing the explosions. I learned how to play pinochle. Any kind of card game, including poker. I learned how to play dice, shoot dice. Sometimes it was for fun, sometimes it was for money. Never big money. Movies. When I first went in the Navy, I had these great big old 16 millimeter movies and three reels. As I got ready to get out of the Navy, it went to DVDs. The last couple of years, and some of those DVDs were they were big. It wasn't like the disc that we have, but they would play the movies on there. When I first went in, you had to go down to the mess decks to watch the movie. Later on, all the ships had a berthing, in the berthing area had a place, and there would be a TV in there, and the movies would be on there. When you was in port, you plugged in the cable at the pier, and you'd have a bunch of channels. Barcelona, Spain. Naples, Italy. Gaeta. Genoa. Philippines, Japan, Hong Kong, Australia, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, New Zealand. And the one ship I was on, we had been slated to do a South American cruise. We was going through the Panama Canal and down the Pacific side and come around and come up, back up. We got down to Panama and we got orders to turn around and go back. But everything that we had on board the ship, we had to offload there. And whoever else was going picked that stuff up and took it. It was all human stuff for the different ports, paint and things. Because when we did cruises like that, we would go to orphanages and places like that and paint. My first trip was on the USS Fisk. We came down to Charleston, And our next door neighbors up in Bayonne had already came down to Charleston. They were stationed down there, and they took me around Charleston. We was down there for 3 weeks, and I fell in love with Charleston. And when I went home, I told my wife we were going to go to Charleston. I got orders, and we went down there. When we moved into housing, we didn't have a curtain that fit any window. So I took her, dropped her off at J.C. Penney's, and I went to DMV to get license plates changed and different car insurance and all that kind of stuff. I came back to J.C. Penney's, and she's with this lady, and this lady and her, like they had been long lost friends. And she just loved that. She was originally from Pennsylvania. She says you don't get that up there. When we were stationed down in Orlando, there's not many people from Florida that's originally from Florida. They're all imports. And that's why she wanted to come back to Charleston. That's why we came back.
Roughly, do you remember what year that was?
What year?
What year you were settling into Charleston?
The first time was 77. And when we came back to Charleston, it was 84. That was my last 2 years in the Navy on board the USS Trip. And that's where I retired from. Last 6 months in the Navy, I was looking for a job. I applied all over Charleston for a job. Nothing came available down there that I wanted. I got contacted about a job up here at Georgetown High School to teach Naval Junior ROTC. I came up and interviewed, taught Naval Junior ROTC at Georgetown High School for 21 years. And during that 21 years, my main class in my classroom that I taught was nothing but freshmen. And out of, I don't know, I averaged about 150 kids a year. So 21 years, a little over 2,000. About 400 of those kids are still quite friendly with me because I'm with them on Facebook. The main goal for the student is to help them make them a better person, a better citizen. It can help them to get a higher pay grade if they go in the military. Instead of going in as an E1, after they go into boot camp and graduate boot camp, they can come out as an E3. They can get scholarships to schools like University of South Carolina, which has an ROTC program up there. Or the Citadel or Clemson. Clemson doesn't have Navy, but it has Army and Air Force, I believe. But there's other schools, and it can help them get into other schools. The curriculum has changed a little bit from when I first started. When I first started, we taught history, and I started back in the days of the Greeks Navy, and I brought it up to the Civil War. Second year they got the Civil War up to First World War, and then in their third and fourth year they got the Second World War to Vietnam. It's changed a little bit. The freshmen don't get that as much. They have a book that teaches all sorts of first aid. Dang, I've been gone for 21 years now, or since 2007, 13 years. So it's changed a little bit of what they taught from when I was first started.
And talk about who you worked with at
Commander Joseph L. Bull III brought me, is the one who hired me in '86. The following, and it was just Joe and myself for the first year, and we had 205 students. Joe taught all the classes on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I sat in the office and listened to what he said and would follow along in the book. And Tuesdays and Thursdays, I took the students outside and marched them. Now, in the Navy, we don't do a lot of marching once you get out of boot camp. You're on board ship. I did a lot of honors boatswain, so I knew how to call them to attention and things like that, so that wasn't a problem. But learning to march and calling cadence stuff, that was all new for me. And so that was the first year, that's what I was doing. And then after that, a few years, Joe retired. And well, the second year, Master Chief Granger, we hired him. Master Chief Granger and myself were stationed together on the USS Mahan. Then Joe retired, and then Captain Deloach was there for a few years, and then Captain Brown was the last senior instructor. When I left, Master Chief Granger was still there. I have 3 stepchildren. I have one son with her. This November she will be passed away for 6 years. But I truly miss that lady. I belong to the American Legion, the VFW. I'm also a member of the Navy Club of Georgetown. All 3 of these groups need new members. American Legion, if you served in the military, you can join. VFW, you have to have been overseas, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but what you have to do. But Navy Club, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, all are welcome to join Navy Club. $55 for 2 meals a year, you and your spouse.